Good morning, everybody. It's Jennifer here, and I had to pop on really quick this morning because I had some really interesting dreams last night. I woke up probably between 1 and 3, and I was up for a couple of hours, which seems to be the norm right now. I think it's probably because of all the energies that are happening at that time on the planet. And last night I had a dream where I was in this competition, this game, and I remember seeing, I've seen a variety of movies like this over the years where there's humans that are in some sort of competition game, and as you go through the game, if you are unsuccessful, you die, you're killed. You're not just have your ego beat up, you're literally killed as part of the game. And I got the sense that it was one of those games that I was in. And it started off where we had to run uphill forever up this large mountain. And I'm not a runner, and I'm not very good at running, and I'm definitely not good at running uphill. So I was running and running and running, and I could barely move. My legs were just so heavy. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't stop, because if I stopped, then I would be killed. And so I kept running up the mountain, and one of the organizers of the game actually came by at one point and was not yelling at me, but not quite encouraging me either, but letting me know that I was losing and I needed to get my butt in gear and get up this hill. And so once I finally made it to the top, I was in this arcade-like room. Well, first you kind of got on a little like trolley, like, when you go to an amusement park and you get on a roller coaster. It was something like that, where each car was for each contestant, we'll say. And I was with my daughters, and we got on this trolley, and I knew we had to do 5 loops through whatever this scenario was. And so we did the first loop, and then the second loop, when we started again, we saw some of the other contestants, and I got the sense that they were already multiple loops ahead of me. And so the second time we went in, we actually went in a different room, and I realized, oh, it's not a repetition of cycles. It is a cycle, but it's slightly different each time. Something to pay attention to here. And so when I got in this second room, it was a big arcade, and we got distracted. We could see the door. I could see the door where you go to the next room to continue on through this loop. But we got distracted by all these games, and we weren't sure, are we supposed to be playing the games so that you can win the tickets and you can take them in for a prize, or should we be just going through the door and bypassing it altogether? So we chose to play a few games and collect some tickets. But then when, we did this for 3 hours, I know it was 3 hours. 3 hours was very firm in my mind. And I got to the point of like, we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting ahead. We're just falling further behind. And so we went to see, like, what could we claim with our tickets? We put all this time and energy into something. We must be able to get some reward for it. And so we took our tickets over, and basically all we could afford with our tickets was a pack of gum, which was essentially useless to us at this point in the game. And so at that point, I made the firm decision, the next time, if we come back into this room again, we're going to bypass it altogether, because there was no point to be caught up in this portion of the game in terms of really fighting and using our energy and time for rewards that were essentially meaningless and useless in the end. And so we decided to go through the door at that point. And as I went through the door, I was suddenly in a new space. My daughter was still with me, but this time it was more of like a coffee shop. And so there was a bunch of other people sitting in the coffee shop. And I didn't notice it at the time. I noticed it a little bit later, but quite a few people were wearing masks, like gas masks, in the coffee shop. But everyone was acting as if that was normal, no big deal. And so we all acted normal. And so as we're sitting there, we were chatting to some people, drinking some coffee, some tea, and I noticed this light sign that appeared out of nowhere. It came down from the ceiling, and all these numbers started running on the sign. And first, first it was just kind of, it seemed like it was random. There was letters and numbers. And then all of a sudden the numbers started sticking out to me. So if there was like 5 numbers, 2 of them would jump out. If there's a bunch of letters, a couple of them would jump out. And I know there was more to it. But the first number that I saw that I can still recall this morning is 244. And it was very strong. Like I woke up just going 244, 244. And so I looked it up this morning, and I find, you can Google numerology all over Google. And you got to be really discerning about what you're looking at, I find. And I've really been drawn lately in the last couple months to looking at the biblical numerology meanings. I find there's just more resonance in there for me. There's a little bit more depth in terms of the meaning. And also because, right now we're going through this battle with light and dark, some of the numbers can be associated with dark energies. And so we need to understand what the potential meaning is with them as well. So 244, from a biblical sense, is related to a cleansing, and it's related to innocent blood and righteousness. When you look up, the angel readings, pretty much any number that they claim as an angel number means that the angels are with you. And so we can take the interpretations of this in any sort of way we want, really. But for me, when I read through the various keywords, the 2 that stood out for me was cleansing and innocent blood. That's where my attention was particularly drawn. And it was the number, they said, associated with the crucifixion, which is interesting because in the last couple of weeks, I've been reading this book called The Jesus Papers, which I'll probably talk about once I've finished it. But just as a highlight, it's based on the work of some historians and archaeologists who have explored a lot of the biblical stories, but in particular, whether Jesus actually died in the crucifixion and whether there may have actually been a cover-up around his death, in which case they also believe that he may have had a child. And so the bloodline of Jesus could still be active on the planet, but that's a whole other thing. So 244 was the first one that I saw: cleansing, innocent blood, righteousness. And then I started to see all these 9s floating through the numbers, as it was very much like a random number generator. And the next number that stood out for me was 909, 909. And the biblical meaning of 909 is to be separated, to expect changes, to expect that aspects of your life might be altered. I want you to pay attention, to be separated. So once that 909 stopped, it was like it stopped, and it was almost like time froze. And right below that sign, this door opened up, and 2 men in some kind of uniform with gas masks, their faces were completely covered, came in with a gun. And the gun was emitting a gas into the coffee shop. Now, at that point, I realized that all of us were wearing gas masks. Everyone was wearing gas masks. And we were on a couch, similar to like the Friends TV show, their coffee shop. Also interesting to note. I pulled my daughter down on my chest, and we laid down on the couch, and we basically played dead, is for lack of better terms. We didn't move, we froze. Now, as the gas was filling the space, there was quite a few people who were coughing. There was people who were taking their masks off. There was people who were freaking out. And so these men who had come in were grabbing anybody who was freaking out and removing them from the space. And then once they left, once those individuals had been removed, then the men left, the door closed, the light was gone, and everything went back to normal. And at that point, those of us who were remaining in the coffee shop kind of went back to normal. We took our masks off and we started chatting. And that was at the point that I woke up. Now, this dream to me has a couple of different meanings, and it's there's more. I know there's more to it, and so normally I don't speak publicly about my dreams, but this one, for whatever reason, I'm being asked to this morning. I was told to not look at any technology before I did this, and in fact, I've tried to live stream this 10 times now, and for whatever reason, YouTube and Google will not let me go live. So we'll see. Maybe this won't even get out there, but I'm going to forge ahead anyway. So as I lay awake, for several hours, I was asking my guides, what does this mean? What is the message? How can I help? What are we to do with this? And here's the message that I keep getting over and over again is step out of the game. Get out of the game. As long as you're in the game, you're caught up in it. And so if we work backwards from the coffee shop, the message they gave me in the coffee shop was notice how those who reacted were the ones who were pulled out and separated. Now, one could assume that maybe they were saved and they were rescued from the gas because of their reaction. That is one interpretation. My interpretation, however, is that they were killed, that they were enslaved due to their reaction. And the message that my guides gave me is notice how those who did not react were removed from the game. They were free. You know, we can say everything went back to normal, but nothing goes back to normal after something like that. Just like nothing's going to go back to normal after this experience that we've had now. And I don't mean that in the way that we're being told the new normal exists. I don't believe in the new normal that's being created for us. I believe in our power to create our own normal, to change those things that have been enslaving us, that have been wrapping us into these games that are not in our highest interest, because the reality is we are not competing against each other. We don't need to die so that our friend, our colleague, our neighbor can survive. That is an illusion, and that is what we need to step out of. And so as we move back into going a little further, working backwards into that dream, and we go into the arcade space, to me, this was representing the work world in a lot of ways. You know, our economy, or how our society has been set up, in that we are spending so much time working towards, you know, these perceived rewards that at the end of the day are really meaningless for us. You know, when we look at the state of materialism and commercialism, they aren't bringing us joy. They aren't bringing us fulfillment. And they aren't allowing us to fulfill our mission here. They aren't allowing us to fulfill the soul's work, the soul's desires that we have come to this planet to do. They are a distraction. They are an illusion. Just think about all the stuff that you have in your house. You know, as part of the lockdown, so many people have been cleaning out their houses, cleaning out their cupboards, you know, simplifying their life. Why did we buy that stuff to begin with? Why are we roped into this sense of needing these material goods and then having to spend so much time working in jobs that don't bring us fulfillment, only to later get rid of those goods? You know, if we could just eliminate that cycle, that process, that loop around, we would gain so much time, and we would gain so much freedom and so much energy that could be placed in creating the beautiful world that we want, in creating that mission, that longing that we have inside that we've always desired. You know, and another thing that's really interesting to me, and having worked in you know, working with the government agencies related to gambling and gambling addiction in my previous careers, you know, just the message around looking at how the arcades and some of those games are really set up to teach that pull, that addiction, that draw into gambling. And you know, on some levels, I'm not really bothered by gambling, but it can create such harm for some people and their families. And is it really in anybody's highest interest? Not really, you know. And so why are we spending time on it? And you know, the idea of being stuck on these tracks, and you know, we have to continue to go through these cycles over and over and over again. And you know, and there's a lot of beliefs in the spiritual community, and I'm not necessarily saying that they're wrong, but I'm saying that it's maybe time for us to question them as well, because you know, we're looking at the systems that have failed us, the systems that haven't even been set up to serve us in the first place, and how they may have been infiltrated by some of these darker intentions to hurt humanity. Well, who's to say that those same intentions, the same energies haven't infiltrated the spiritual community? So we need to really look at and feel the energy and the intention behind some of these beliefs that we have held for so long, and ask ourselves, how long have we really held them? You know, are these really ancient practices, or are these just practices that have been developed in the last, you know, few decades? And where were they created from? Who actually created them? And what was their intention, and what were their influences behind it, right? And so, you know, this idea that we're going to repeat our lessons until we learn them, maybe it's true. Maybe that is a possibility. And, you know, there is a certain amount of my own soul that believes that, but there's also a part of my soul that questions, you know, how long, you know, do we have to repeat it? And at what point do we actually learn the lesson? And how much trauma and suffering do we really need to go through to learn that lesson? You know, maybe we don't need to suffer as much as we think we do. And so, you know, paying attention to these ideas of cycling through and repeating and having to suffer and having to make mistakes, you know, maybe there's an easier way. And then going back to the, you know, the beginning of the dream where I'm climbing this mountain, I'm running up this mountain, which I don't even like to do in the first place. And yet I felt like I felt like I had no choice but to climb this mountain. And what if, you know, this whole game was a loop? And this is what my guides were showing me, is that, you know, I'd climb this mountain, I'd go through these loops in this arcade, I'd go through this loop in the cafe, and there would be more to it. And eventually I'd come back right where I started. And I want you to ask yourself, with everything that's happened in the last couple months, how many of you feel as if you're right back where you started many years ago? I've talked to so many people, myself included, who have made great strides in our progress, who feel like we've grown as an individual, like we've grown as a soul, like we've done some healing, we've worked through our wounds, and yet here we are back again, feeling some of those same things, working through some of those same problems again. And we're told in the spiritual community, well, it must be because we didn't fully release it. It must be because there's more work to do. But what if that's not the case? What if instead we've hooked in to some sort of belief that we have to be part of this game, that we have to be part of this illusion that is not allowing us to see our reality? And so I ask you this, when we look at quantum time, we experience time here on the earth as linear, where we have to go in one direction and one foot in front of the other to get through our challenges. And so even if we end up back in the same place, that just means that we're not actually in the same place, we're further ahead, but we're repeating a pattern. Okay? Now, quantum time suggests that I could be here in this time, I could be in the future, and I could be in the past all at once. So if I'm playing this game that essentially is a loop, and I'm going to climb the mountain, I'm going to go into the arcade, I'm going to go into the cafe, do some other things, and eventually end up right back where I started. What if I chose to not go in the loop at all? What if I chose, I'm not going to climb that mountain? I'm not going to climb that mountain because I don't want to climb that mountain, because that's not part of what I want to do. It's not one of my strengths. It's not something that I enjoy. There is literally no part of me that wants to climb that mountain other than feeling like I'm being pulled there by some energy outside of myself. And if I don't, I'm going to be harmed. But if I choose to not even enter that loop, if I choose to not even start that game, I don't experience any of that suffering. None of it. And you could say, you could argue, well, then you're not going to experience any growth. You're not going to learn any lessons. But what if the lesson is to not get pulled into the loop? What if that is your ultimate freedom? To say, I see the game and I'm choosing not to participate in it. We know that a lot of the entities, the dark energy forces, the ones that are not here for humanity, who don't want to help us, the ones who have, we could say, invaded our planet, or maybe they're just in the multidimensional space that we have access to. We know that they feed off of our fear, they feed off of our suffering. What if the way to, we could say win this battle, but that's not really the term we're looking at as we move into the higher dimensions. But what if our freedom depends on us just not playing the game? What if it's that simple? What if we don't need to hurt anybody else? What if we don't need to name call? What if we don't need to use physical violence? What if we don't even need to destroy anybody in the other realms? But all we need to do is see the game and step out. That's it. So the question becomes, how do we do that? How do we do that? How do we step out of this game? If enough people step out of the game, if you're playing Monopoly and you walk away, you're like, I'm out, I'm not playing this game. And I have a long history of doing this. I hate board games. I'm just going to put that out there. And I don't like to admit that because I feel like I'm a bad person because I don't like board games. But my husband and I are the same way. We've never liked card games. We've never liked board games. Once enough people step out, that game can't be played anymore. It really can't. And so the question becomes, if you're not playing the game, what are you doing? And in my life, I've chosen a lot of times to step away from the board games, to keep it real simple. And what I've done in the board games is I've usually just sat on the couch, but in those moments, that feels like nothing. It feels like you're not participating. Okay, I'm getting more here. But it allowed me to sit and reflect. It allowed me to be with my own thoughts. It allowed me to make a choice that resonated with how I was feeling. And yes, you could say you're a loner, but I wasn't doing it to be alone. I wasn't doing it saying nobody else could join me in an alternative activity. I was doing it because it didn't resonate with me, because competition is something that has never really resonated with me. I've never felt comfortable with it. And the times when I did play the games, I often chose to lose so that I could get out of it earlier. And I don't know that that's the path we want to take in this scenario when the stakes are so large. But what if we all stepped away from the game, and instead of choosing to create a new game or a new system or anything along that lines, we simply paused and we gave individuals the space to do what they wanted to do what was in their highest interest. Go plant a garden, go play music, go journal, go sit outside and do nothing, go work out, create something in the world that brings beauty and harmony and unity and love, instead of competition and hate and violence. We really got to look at how we're responding to this game that's being played. And, that brings me to this concept of, collective consciousness, group mind, unity mind, hive mind. There's a lot of people talking about that. And a couple months ago when I was traveling, part of my work here is to connect with people. And when we were permitted to run retreats in person, a big part of it was working with individuals. Now, here's the thing that often gets confused in that work. is that some people perceived that my work was about creating group mind, group consciousness. And on some levels it is. But my path, my intention was never to create a collective consciousness or a unity mind by forcing everyone to believe the same thing, because that negates the beauty and the harmony and the intention of unity consciousness. My goal was to allow people to have freedom of thoughts, for the consciousness to be free from this loop, from this game, for people to see the game so that they could step out of it and once again feel within their own hearts, within their own bodies, who they were, who they truly were, without any kind of manipulation, without any peer pressure, without any societal pressure. And once you know who you are clearly and truly, then you can make the choice. Then you know what you believe. And when everyone is acting from that intention, then we organically begin to discover that we believe and want the same things. But we cannot force it. And so, you know, there's this idea that I was called out on by a very significant public figure in the spiritual community, that by not joining in a particular practice, that I would never be able to help others create group mind. And the instant that those words were spoken to me, my soul immediately came through and said, no, that's not what I'm about. That's not what I'm about. Because to create a collective consciousness out of love, there can be no force. Love and force are in polarity with each other. You cannot force somebody to love you. It's not going to work that way. You might be able to invite them, but people have to come to these choices of their own free will. And the dark energies that are out there are manipulating the free will. They're looking for the loopholes so that you use your free will to make choices to get into that game. That's what they're doing. So that you are still using their free will. That's the loophole. You are still using your own free will. But the moment you see the game, that loophole is null and void. Because you are thinking for yourself, you are feeling for yourself, and you are making the choice for yourself. And so this whole reality that our life has been built on is just one loop. One loop. And when we step back and we say, I'm not even going to start the climb of that mountain, because guess what? There's a whole it's infinite outside of that loop. There is any landscape you want. I mean, I work in the multidimensional space, and so for me, it's just space. That's what my soul loves. I love just big empty space, right? Where you don't even have to be in a body, you can just exist. Right? And when we get to that dimensional space, when we get into those higher dimensions, there is no you and me. You know, there is no us versus them. There is just this pure consciousness where we do share our thoughts, where names aren't even important. You know, and we can sit here and argue about names and labels, and that's fine. And that on this dimension, there is value to that. But there are so many of us who are working in these other dimensions or are striving to go back to those dimensions. And so we struggle with the labels, not out of hate, but because we know a place of love where those labels don't exist. And so as we move forward, as we start to see the game, and there's more and more people who are seeing it, and the challenge is we first see it, but we still don't know how to get out of it. You know, we're running up that mountain and we're going, geez, I never should have came up this mountain. Can I just go back down? Do I have to complete the whole loop to get out of here? Do I just walk off? At this point, you know, the first step is to see it. And then the second step is to really have some courage to see the different ways that you are using your free will to participate, and then take that free will back and use it to not participate. Okay, and I think that's as much as I'm going to share today, but look at the symbolism that's out there. Ask yourself the questions. As the virus starts to go down, as the rates and the risks are reduced, why is there more of a push to wear masks? Is that for our health? There's not even a requirement of what kind of mask you're to wear. It doesn't even really matter where it is on your face. We're not even using them effectively. So is that part of our reality, or is that part of the game that we're in? And there's so many different examples of this right now, you know, and perhaps for you at the time that you're at in the place that you're at, it may not be clear whether it's part of the game or it's part of the reality, and that's okay. Make a choice based on how you feel in that moment. And if you choose to change your mind in the future, know that that is okay too. You are not locked into it. We have all of us have been pulled into the game in different ways, at different times, at different levels, you know, and there's no guilt or shame in that, because it is a brilliant strategy in some regards. But also know that you don't need to feel guilty about that. You don't need to feel any shame about that. There is enough of that going around. That is part of the game, is the guilt and the shame. So if you realize at one point, maybe you're in the arcade, that you want to step out, change your mind. And don't feel like you have to defend yourself for doing it. Don't feel like you need to apologize for getting that far in the game before realizing it. It doesn't matter. You know, once you're out, you'll realize that you have no ill will towards anybody who's still in the game, because you've been in it. You have felt it. So you aren't going to wish any harm on those people. You aren't going to want to hurt them. You aren't going to think that they're idiots. When you're fully out, those emotions don't exist anymore. All you have is compassion. And you also have patience, because you know that those individuals need to see the game to escape it. We can't go in and force them out. It's not going to work. All we can do is wait in the space outside that loop. And when we see someone trying to get out, is we can hold up the sign, we can reach out a hand, and we can say, hey, it's over here. You're not alone out here. You're not the only one out here. And when they come out, instead of forcing them into a new paradigm, forcing them into another loop or a new reality, we say, now you're free. What do you want? What do you want to do? What is your soul contract, your true higher self soul contract want to do? And I support you in that. And I honor your support for me in that. And let's see where that takes us. Rather than having to argue and agree and commit to all these plans, why don't we just allow ourselves to be free for a period of time and make our decisions from a place of peace and freedom and calm? So that's that. I don't want to share more about the symbols and stuff because obviously some of the powers that be don't want that to be released, but I'm more than happy to discuss them in private with anybody if you have questions, or if you are on your own journey and you want to discuss it, or you just want someone to listen that isn't going to judge you, that isn't going to think you're crazy. That know that I'm here. You can go on my website, jenniferkavanagh.ca, and set up a time, and we can chat or do some energy work in that regard. And I hope everyone is doing well. Definitely pay attention to your dreams. Pay attention to when you're awake at night, your sleep patterns. Pay attention to the things that just don't feel right. Even if you don't know what they mean, even if you don't know whether you can trust that feeling yet, that's okay. Just pay attention to the fact that it's there, because the human body is a powerful tool. It's very receptive to energies. And if your soul is still connected to your body, you're receiving messages right now. And unfortunately, because of the manipulation of energy, we have lost our ability to interpret them. But that's coming back, and we're working towards that together. And as we all start to learn and become more aware, we are going to be a force to be reckoned with. We already are. So I wish everybody much love, and I hope you have a beautiful day. And I wish you freedom. That's what I wish you today. Take care, everyone.